Now that we are basically on the other side of the COVID-19 coronavirus crisis, we're past the crisis part of it. I think that it's really important that we talk about crisis communications. I feel like during the beginning of COVID in early 2020, most of us were flailing like maniacs trying to figure out what to say, how to say it, what to communicate, how to communicate it. It was a just complete mess. And some people got it really right and other people got it really wrong. And unfortunately, not having a plan and getting it wrong could have been fatal. Like, not for your life, but for a lot of small businesses. A lot of businesses grew in 2020 and into 2021, but a lot of small business owners went out of business. A lot of people did not survive. And it wasn't because of a loan program that didn't get them, that they didn't get, or it wasn't any of those things. That could have been a touch point or something that was a part of it. But the actual reason why so many of us went out of business is not because doors had to be closed, but because we did not have a method by which to really stay on brand and actually use that branding as a way to tie our customers to us during scary times. And so what this article, what this video is all about, is actually helping us to really align ourselves so that if and when, I would say when we reach the point in our businesses where things get scary, we have a way, we have a method. And I will even say from personal experience, this is not about just what's happening in the world, but I have worked with companies before where very scary things happened inside of the companies, things that happened that were impacting customers, things that happened that were impacting team members. I have had during COVID, we had a team that I worked with. One of my client teams had a very tragic event happen internally. And there's always things like this happen where we have to figure out what to say and what to do. And I think part of knowing what to do in those times is actually building a brand around having responses baked into the brand so that you're not wondering what you should be saying and what you should be doing, but you have that already designated. You can come in and maybe make adjustments for what the actual reality is, but you are not flying by the seat of your pants. And so let us stop pantsing it and make a plan so that if and when things get hairy again in the future, we can come at them with knowledge and with strength and with conviction about how our brand deals with these sorts of things. So what are the rules? What are the things that I think we should be doing if we're going to prepare? First things first is that we need to have a core message. You need to have a developed core message of what it is that your business does, regardless of how you're going to actually do the thing. And so what I mean by a core message, and where I think a lot of businesses were really super successful in COVID, was that they had a message that was not based in their product, but more based in their customers' motivation. An example would be that there were so many restaurants that were, again, shuttered for one reason or another. And many of them were not in a position, because restaurant margins are so small and all that, they were not in a position immediately to do takeout and things like that. And so the restaurants that survived, a lot of them had a core message that was not about food. And because the core message was not about food, they were able to stay in business because they were able to communicate that core message without losing any value because they were unable to deliver the food. And that is what I mean by not having your core message be surrounding your delivery of the product or service. Your core message should be about what it is that your organization does, regardless of who is at the head of it, regardless of what it is that you actually deliver. What is that message? Another example is that, again, during COVID, we had a lot of losses. A lot of people passed away during COVID. And one of the brands that I follow, the leader of that brand, which is very similar to my brand, they are an educational company, and a lot of their educational products basically everything in their company's educational products hinged on a single person delivering that content. And that person passed away completely unrelated to COVID. They had cancer. They died of cancer. It was not related to COVID at all, but it happened during that time. And what was amazing is that without even, it was not an expected thing. The person was in remission. There was no expectation that they were going to die. But before the person passed away, there was actually somewhat of a succession plan or a communication plan around the products and services that had already been developed. And that person's business still exists, even though they themselves don't. And so that is what I mean by having a core message that isn't about you, that isn't about what you deliver specifically, but is about your customer's motivation. Because if you can deliver a core message around your customer's motivation, then it doesn't quite matter what happens in the world. You can still solve for that motivation, and you can communicate around that motivation without it being related to like you specifically having to serve them food, but maybe there are other things, other services, other ways that you can actually work with your customer inside of what their motivations are that serve them without you having to serve them that core thing that they were coming to you for. So developing that core message is huge. And depending on, I can't really give too many specific examples because depending on what it is you do, your core message may be very different. The idea, though, is that the core message is not about you. It is about your customer. It is about their motivation. It is about their desires. It is very much in the vein of making sure that we're serving what the customer actually needs, what the customer wants, what the customer is coming to us for is not food. It is not. Customer can get food at the grocery store. The customer can make their own hamburgers. So when a customer is coming to you for hamburgers, what are they actually getting? What are they actually coming to you for? And if you are hinging your entire business on you make the best hamburgers, and for some reason, hamburgers start being a problem, like the cows all go bad or whatever, that is not even an unheard of thing. If there's a listeria outbreak or something happens, a salmonella, whatever it is, something E. coli, that's a beef thing, right? Something like that happens, you will be in a position to still communicate value. If you look at a company like Jenny's Ice Cream, Jenny's Ice Cream is one of my absolute favorite examples of a company that was delivering a message that was not just about ice cream, so that they had to stop production due to a listeria outbreak at one of the dairy farmers that they use. And they were doing production tracking. They knew exactly which pints they had and all of that. But y'all, the reason why Jenny's stopped production was not because they couldn't figure out where the pints were and all of that. They stopped production because they thought it was more important to their company to communicate safety as a value than it was to communicate openness and money. Like they felt like the brand long term would have better customer relationships and better customer value if they communicated, we care about your safety more than we care about selling you ice cream. And so instead of just selling the pints that they knew were not affected or all of that, nope, they took the whole production offline. They emptied shelves. They completely went to zero from scratch, did full cleans, the whole thing, and came back stronger, bigger, better because of it. And they have now essentially entrenched themselves in the minds of their customers as a company that's core value is safety, of my safety. So they care about me, they care about my family, they care about us being safe. In addition to us having fantastic ice cream flavors to choose from, they care about my safety. And that is huge. So that's what I mean by developing a core message that is not necessarily related to your product. Now, you may, in the moment of crisis, have to develop that core message according to the crisis you're in. Now, the good thing is that if you have an alignment with your customer, it can be relatively easy for you to figure out what that core message should be. Now, Jenny was in line with her customer. Her name's actually Jenny Brittenbauer was in line with her actual customer. And because she was aligned with her customer, she was able to make sure that communication plan around safety was really what they did. They went towards that core message and they went all in on it. And then everything that the company did from that point was always about that. And once they moved past that, now years and years later, that is not necessarily a part of their core messaging, but it was during a time when they needed it to be, because they needed to be able to communicate to people. That was what they were doing for us to help us feel more comfortable with their company. Okay. So develop that core message, then align that core message with your customer story. So this again is super important. Jenny did that really well. The company Jenny's did that really well. They aligned their message of safety with our story as consumers of ice cream, as people who are bougie and want the best. Essentially, you're not paying $10 a pint for a gamble on safety, right? And so they acknowledge that, and they are aligned their customer story, their core message, sorry, they align that core message with the customer story. And that alignment, boom, it just was massive. It changed everything. And it made it a lot easier for them to communicate that message. The other thing that they did, and that we all need to do if we're going to be branding our businesses in a smart way, is to be proactive about that communication. So you should not be waiting until people ask you why you're off the shelves and why is this happening. You should not wait for them to ask you. Jenny's was not the only company that was affected by that specific Listeria outbreak. It was at a dairy that affected a lot of people. It's just that so much of their production was based in that one dairy that they had a lot of issues. And so they ended up giving a much bigger statement about it than a lot of other companies that use that same dairy farm for their milk. And so what they did, though, is that they were super proactive about communication, to the extent that at the time when they were off the shelves, I believe, and this is, again, based on my experience, this specific part is based on my experience. The rest of it I actually know from hearing it directly from Jenny. But the experience that I had was that the store shelves for Jenny's stayed open. So you could see where the Jenny's ice creams were. And there's actually a sign on the window that explained what was going on. And so that is extremely proactive communication. So instead of letting go of their shelf space, they kept their shelf space, which means they had to pay for it. They paid a lot of money during that time, but they paid for that shelf space, kept it available, and had a sign up about what the expected timeline was for getting ice cream back into the marketplace, why they were out of the marketplace. They were extremely proactive with their social media messaging, extremely proactive with email marketing. They were very proactive in communication, and they were proactive in the entire time. And even to this day, when they are launching a product and doing things, they are extremely proactive about communication, because that is a value that they hold, that we, as someone who is willing to pay $10 a pint for ice cream, I want to know what is going on with my $10 pint ice cream, like at any given point in time. And because they were able to do that, it really made such a huge difference. Now, using them as an example, I want you guys to understand one of the reasons why I like using Jenny's ice cream as an example in this context is because they were at the time a very small business. When this was happening, they were not micro. They were not like a lot of us who were super, super small. But at the time, they were in a few locations. They had a few physical locations and maybe a couple hundred retailers. They were distributed by maybe a couple distribution companies, but it was not huge by a long shot. They were not that big. And as a function, though, of their small business roots and the fact that they were being led by their founder, they really were able to be super proactive and communicate super quickly about what was going on with their company. And that was one of the things that made them able to recover so much more quickly, is that they really held tight to that rule of proactive communication. And then the next rule that is going to help you if you are a small business and you're trying to communicate during crisis or difficult times is collecting feedback and adjusting. So based on that feedback. So collecting feedback from your audience on a regular basis. And so if you are having an issue and you need to communicate with your audience, communicating with your audience and then not say turning off the comments so that you can't get any comments from people. And if you don't want to have the open comments, still giving people a way to give you feedback. So maybe you turn off the comments because it is maybe wrought with misinformation and things like that. That I can understand. I completely understand the desire to make sure that you're communicating very clearly. And so you might want to turn off any communication channels that are going to encourage misinformation, but you absolutely still want to then give people the opportunity to communicate with your organization in a clear and distinct value so that you can get feedback from your environment. You need to be able to really get that feedback, to understand what people's experiences are, and then adjust your messaging accordingly. Because in all reality, what we are always doing is following our customer's lead. And so if you are going down a path and your customer is telling you you need to go on a different path, or you need to move to the side on that same path, you need to be listening to your customer. So making sure that you have a method of communication, a method of collecting feedback, and that you are listening to that feedback specifically during a crisis. And then giving, when I say open communication and proactive communication, using that proactive communication to encourage that feedback. So have the feedback ability, like the ability for you to collect that feedback, and then also making the channel clearly available for people to give that feedback, because that is going to help you, again, stay in alignment, stay on brand, follow the customer wherever they're going. If you're able to do that via collecting feedback, massive. So the last thing, the last rule that we really need to be following if we are trying to be smart with our branding, trying to be smart with our small businesses, is be flexible, be nimble. One of the biggest benefits of being a small business is that we can be quick, right? Like, you are a small business owner, you should be able to make relatively massive changes in your business relatively quickly. And so if you are in a position where something is happening, things are changing, you need to be reacting quickly to those changes. You need to not be talking about, okay, we're going to take a week and figure this out. And you need to be communicating during that week. I think that, again, if COVID taught us anything, it was that the longer you're silent, the more assumptions fill the space, right? And so if you are silent, people will make all sorts of assumptions. It is way more important that we are extremely proactive and very flexible and very nimble with our communication, with our moves that we're making during a crisis. Now, being flexible and being nimble does not mean that I want you to be reckless. That's not at all what I'm saying. I am not saying that you should just make a move and figure it out later. That's crazy talk and will get you out of business. What I am saying, think, be thoughtful, have a committee maybe that you're communicating with. If you have, as a lot of people with small businesses have, a thing called a kitchen cabinet. If y'all have never heard that before, a kitchen cabinet is a group of people that you consult with in your business on a regular basis. It is the equivalent of a board of directors, but for a small business. And I think a lot of us, as small business owners, we should have a kitchen cabinet. We should have a little group of people who are like our small business advisors. Maybe have a mentor or two in there that you can communicate with quickly. Maybe not all at the same time. You do not have to be on a big conference call with these people, but you can communicate with them and get an idea of what it is you want to do, communicate with your team, get an idea of what it is you want to do, be flexible with that. So if you all decide on Monday that you're going to go down one path, but you're getting feedback, you're doing this process, you're putting out the messaging, and you realize, wait, we need to adjust, our customers want us to do this, then you need to take a couple of days maybe and figure out if that secondary path is the right way, and then move to the secondary path. We need to be willing to be flexible, because if we can be flexible with our brands and actually follow our customers where they're going, we can stay in business during a crisis. We can actually do things that are going to make our businesses grow and flourish because we're actually following our customer where our customer is, instead of trying to force our customer to follow us. Again, COVID taught us a lot. And one of the things that it taught us is that the businesses that were flexible, nimble, and followed their customer are the ones that succeeded. This is not about breaking the law or anything like that. So if your customer was like, I ain't wearing no mask in this bar, that is not the same thing as saying we are a maskless bar then. Not saying that you should do that, but I am saying that within the parameters that you're being given in whatever crisis you're in, trying to adjust to what your customer actually wants. As we saw, a lot of people who had locations that had the potential for outdoor space started building outdoor spaces for people. When a lot of states decided that there would be no more smoking indoors, a lot of bars and restaurants figured out how to get the ability for smokers to still come to their facilities. And the same sort of thing was happening with COVID. Okay, we have this environment now where we're going to have to adjust, and you can adjust quickly. There were lots of people who made fantastic quick adjustments that saved their businesses. And it's really important for us as small business owners that we are always thinking like that. You do not want to come out of COVID. Especially if you started a business during COVID, you don't want to start your business and be like, oh, I've already suffered the worst thing that can happen. Believe me, there are worse things. And whenever something comes up, that is like specific to your business. It is not something everyone else is going through or specific to your industry. Or maybe even you yourself are having some sort of personal crisis. I know in our business, we have had times where I was out of commission for one reason or another, and I've had health issues and things like that made it so that I was not the one that day that could do anything. And we had to put in plan ways to be flexible and nimble. And matter of fact, now that is a very core part of my business, is trying to always make sure that even though I may be the face of this brand, that I'm not the only person who's in it. I'm not the only person that you're communicating with whenever you communicate with predictable results marketing. And so that is super important to me, because I want to make sure that this brand lasts beyond me. It may not last beyond my lifetime because I plan on living forever, but I do want it to at the very least last beyond an arthritis flare up, or if I get food poisoning or the flu or whatever. Like, I need to be able to make sure that the business still works, even if there is something that is taking me out of commission. So be flexible, be nimble. Those are my, what was that, 5? Those are my 5 rules for smart branding for your small business. Make sure that you are developing a core message. Make sure that you are aligning that message with your customer story, always and forever. Be proactive with your communication. Absolutely. Do not let them have to ask you questions. And then make sure that you are collecting feedback the entire time, as much as possible, and being proactive and letting people know how you're collecting feedback. How can they actually reach out to you and get feedback to you? And then make adjustments based on that feedback. Don't just collect the feedback and let it sit in a box. Listen to it, read it, watch it, and move with the feedback. And then last, be flexible, be nimble, be quick. Don't be stupid though. So don't be reckless, but be flexible. We would love to make sure that you are staying in business no matter what crisis comes towards you at any given point in time, but that is going to require some very smart branding. Now that you have thought through these core concepts, I am going to challenge you to take this one step further. We have a small business brand audit that really helps you to walk through your small business and determine where you are right now. It helps you identify your customer's perspective and help you position your brand based on your competitive evaluations. It also helps you to align yourself through mapping your customer's motivations. And all of these things can actually help you to determine, again, where your small business fits on the path to actually being a brand. This self-guided brand audit is completely free and available to you at the link that is going to be somewhere. How links are, they move. I don't know where it's going to be, but it's going to be somewhere very near. And you will have the opportunity to download this audit and take it yourself. It is in the format of a PDF download. So once you actually download it, it is available to you to use whenever you see fit. It consists of 8 videos as well as 14 pages of workbook that allow you to work through some instructional activities to actually help you to move yourself more in alignment with your brand, move your small business into alignment with your brand, and actually help you make that transition from kind of small business owner into a brand, which is, of course, what we are all aiming to do. When you're trying to learn and grow, that is always the aim, is to get ourselves to the point where we are not just a small business owner, but we are the owners of a brand. I encourage you to go ahead and download that small business brand audit. It is completely free. Click the link to get yourself started, and I will see you on the inside of the brand audit.